call it to order.
Okay, this meeting of the Open Space Commission is hereby called to order.
Okay, I'll do the roll call. Commissioner Mike Wilson,
Here.
Commissioner Bruce Allen,
Here.
Commissioner Mary Green. Here.
She's here. Can you hear us, Mary?
Oh, yes, sorry. Was that me? I didn't hear my name.
No problem. Sorry, speak up. Commissioner Bruce Fox is absent. Commissioner Jacqueline Thomas.
Present.
Commissioner Lina Wallen is absent. She's sick today. She said she really wanted to be here. And Commissioner Nat White is absent as well. And Councilmember Deborah Harris.
Here.
Land acknowledgement statement. Flagstaff Open Space Commission humbly acknowledges the ancestral homelands of this area's indigenous nations and original stewards. These lands, still inhabited by native descendants, border mountains sacred to the indigenous peoples. We honor them, their legacies, their traditions, and their continued contributions. We celebrate their past, present, and future generations who will forever know this space as home. Next is the approval of the minutes from the April 24th, 2023 meeting. Motion to approve them as written.
So moved. No.
Minutes are approved. Public participation.
Yeah, sorry.
What?
The process for the minutes.
Oh.
So I can ask all in favor.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There are none, so they're approved. Is that correct?
Yep.
All right, correct. Doing great. All right, public participation. At this time, any member of the public may address the commission on any subject that is not scheduled before the commission on this day. The Arizona Open Meeting Law prohibits the commission from discussing or taking action on an item which is not listed on the prepared agenda. Commission members may, however, respond to criticism made by those addressing the commission, ask staff to review a matter, or ask that a matter be placed on a future agenda. To address the commission on an item that is on this agenda, please wait for the chair to call for public comment at the time the item is heard. Are there any members of the public who wish to address the commission?
Yes, I have. My name is Sarah Woolidge. I'm also an open space employee at the city, but I did just want to put something on the commission's radar that we are applying for a grant that's due pretty soon. This grant will go to fund signage, educational signage on McMillan Mesa. And we are requesting a letter of endorsement to apply for this grant from the commission. And I will draft a letter that the commission can review and sign, and I'll send it out to be reviewed. I think that's all. I just wanted to put it on the radar.
Thanks, Sarah. We might have a future email about that. And then I had an item as well. I wanted to introduce Jacqueline Thomas to the commission. The open space, or excuse me, the city council just reappointed Nat White and Bruce Fox and appointed Jacqueline Thomas.
Thank you. Robert thinks it's only been a year since I've been on the commission, but the whole COVID things happened since I was here last, which has got to be about 3 years. But I was honored to be on the commission in the past. I really support open spaces of Flagstaff, and I hope to be a contributing member. Currently, I work for Arizona State Land Department, the Blue Squares, and it's always exciting to read about the trail plan on a piece of land that came from the State Land Department. So I like the history of that. And I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome, good to have you here.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the public? Great, let's move on to the business items. And I think the first item up is the Observatory Mesa Trail Plan. Is that correct, Robert?
Yes, great. Thank you, Commissioner Eklund. So we did have a little reordering of our agenda items given the brevity of our meeting today. So we have Mark Mosa from SDR that is going to walk us through a presentation on the trail plan.
Hello, commissioners. This is Mark Loseth with Southwest Decision Resources. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, thank you, commissioners, for the time to be able to speak with you today about the Greater Observatory Mesa Area Trail Plan. We have a short presentation prepared, and I will work through it to make sure that we have some time for discussion in the end. There's a few discussion items that Robert and I would love the commission's thoughts on. And so I will begin sharing screen and get into the presentation. We will have time for questions at the end. Don't hesitate to let me know if you need any clarification, if you'd like more information moving forward. But we will get through this presentation first. So for the past few years, we have been working on developing a trail plan for the Greater Observatory Mesa area. So what this effectively means, kind of the zoomed out view, is we have been engaged with the Coconino National Forest and Lowell Observatory throughout this process to make sure that we were designing a plan that reflects the desires of the community and is respectful as possible of the space that Observatory Mesa is. And so, at this zoomed out detail, we are proposing, and backing up one moment, this is a draft plan. This is currently in proposal stage. We are engaging the public in a future process, and we have not sought approval from the city council. So right now we are generating feedback from folks within our interested partners group, and in the near term future, we'll be reaching out to the public. And so we're looking at, we looked at the entire geography of the Mesa. We looked at the potential for new trails and opportunities that they can provide. We looked at the existing infrastructure out there, whether authorized or unauthorized, for which trails, make sense to be potentially adopted and included, and which unauthorized trails make more sense to restore from a sustainability standpoint. We're also looking at developing and installing education areas. They're kind of the brownish polygons that you see on the north, or not the north, but the south and east sides of the Mesa. Proposing, creating some educational kiosks and signage to kind of create more of a experiential education opportunity for folks. We're looking at improving parking. There's not much parking for Observatory Mesa right now, and we're looking at expanding the opportunities there. And we are making sure that everything that we are proposing, meets the desires of the open space management plan and reflects the special nature of the open space on Observatory Mesa. So the planning process began with us engaging those land managers, but it really started beforehand. In 2018 and 2019, there was a collaborative planning process that involved the community called the Flagstaff Trails Initiative. Some of you may have been a part of some of those working groups or community meetings. But what this was really a regional look at the community of Flagstaff and the trail infrastructure, and looking at, what can be improved, if anything. And so that structure kind of had a core team of land managers, had a variety of different working groups that kind of really dug in on some of the more specific regions of Flagstaff to kind of identify what improvements could be made. And there was also a couple of community meetings where, all of the thoughts and ideas and recommendations that came forth from the working groups and the core team were brought to the public to, kind of gauge how we were doing from a planning process. Out of that process, there was a regional working group that looked at Observatory Mesa, and combined with those priorities and the priorities throughout the rest of the Flagstaff region, we did have 4 high priorities that were identified through this FTI planning process that were directly relevant to Observatory Mesa. So new stacked loop trail system, meaning there's not frequent, but enough junctions to create a multitude of opportunities for trail use. Connecting Fort Valley and the Observatory Mesa trail systems. So the existing Fort Valley trail system just north of Highway 180, geographically north of the Mesa. Adopting appropriate user-created trails on Lowell properties for system inclusion. So really taking a look at the existing trails in that southeast corner of the Mesa to see which ones are appropriate and which ones, could be adopted and managed for future use, but also looking at user-created trails and which ones are the most obvious to close down and restore if they don't meet the resource protection needs of the open space program and the other land managers involved. And then there was a medium priority that was expressed in the FTI regional strategy. That was a commuter route from the Flagstaff urban trail system, the Mars Hill and Tunnel Springs area on the Mesa to connect to Baderville. All of these 5 bullets on this slide were incorporated into this plan to best reflect the efforts of FTI. So where we're at in the planning process right now, we kind of got going 2020, 2021, really developing this plan based on that FTI, all of the information, all the recommendations, and all of the planning criteria that came out of that was used as kind of the foundation of the plan. Last summer, we conducted a community meeting, the first community meeting to show the first draft of this plan, to really get a sense of, what the public thought of, where we were headed, what the direction was of this plan, and to make sure we were on the right track. So we got 323 comments, both through the online community forum platform and at the in-person community meeting event itself. And each one of those was reviewed. So we went through and looked at every single comment and kind of applied our set of criteria to make sure that, our plan and the comments expressed were in alignment. Through that process, there were a few comments, some of the more high volume comments, and then some of the other ones that weren't necessarily clear to the folks that were revising the plan. And because we weren't, it wasn't obvious whether an idea should be applied or rejected as far as making amendments to the plan go, we decided that we should reach out to our stakeholders, our interested partners, which, this commission is a very important element of that. And so we began about 3 weeks ago, we began a stakeholder engagement process where we really were asking for, input and advice and guidance on some specific elements of the plan and anything in general that any entity would like to give to us as a body. And so think, of our interested partner groups as the commissions of the city of Flagstaff, the environmental organizations, trail advocacy organizations, homeowners associations are adjacent to the Mesa, really trying to get some feedback from. Once this phase is complete, we will be amending the plan as needed for release as a second draft to the community. And so we are anticipating early June to release the next version of the draft for a 40-day comment window. And so the comments will be accepted on the online community forum platform that the city of Flagstaff has for 40 days. And we're also planning, we're also planning a second community meeting for June 14th at the Aquaplex. So similar to the first round of public engagements, we'll be looking for as much feedback, thoughts, and ideas as we possibly can get to review for a final draft that we are planning on presenting to the city of council to get or to seek approval for the plan itself. This plan is being put forth by the city of Flagstaff. And so, approval, the end game for approval lies with the city council. We're not on any city council agenda yet, but we're hoping for sometime in the fall. So basically, what's in the plan? Looking at this map on the right side of your screen, new single track trails. So these dashed purple lines, these are concept lines. And so these are not formal trail alignments. These have not been ground truthed to make sure that they're sustainable, that they avoid any sensitive areas, and that they will, work for the long term once implemented. So about 23 miles in total, which includes that connection up to the Fort Valley Trail System going up to the north on Observatory Mesa Natural Area and the Forest Service lands. Looking at 5 miles of trail restoration. So a variety of trails were identified to not quite meet the needs of the community or not provide the sustainable alignments that we're really looking for on the Mesa. 11 miles of road restoration. These are some of these like thick dashed lines, these gray lines that you can see. Some of these lines do not provide a lot of recreation value, and they also support some, at times motorized incursion on the mesa that if we're thinking can be restored back to their natural settings, we'll be able to reduce some impact on the landscape. 2 new access points. So really looking at expanding access for the community of Flagstaff. There were 4 access points originally, and we were able to find 2 to get agreement and buy-in on those to expand that to 6. 2 new parking areas. So out on the west edge of the mesa on this map, there's a little hiker symbol. This parking lot is proposed to be just within OMNA lands and intended to be a kind of a small area, not intended for a high volume of use for folks that are kind of looking to access that, the quieter side of the mesa where, solitude will be easier to find out there. On the south side, we are looking at the city-owned property that's just west of the Public Works Yard. This is on West Route 66 as you're headed out of town toward the freeway. There's about 15 acres that are owned by the city of Flagstaff that could be a really great launching point for outdoor recreation opportunities on the mesa. This is in really close proximity to an existing foot trail, which could provide really quality access to get to the mesa itself. This parking area we are looking at being, one of the more, marquee and desirable places. If you are going to access the mesa by car, one of the more desirable places to drive to park and, access the trails from there. So looking at more amenities there than on the west side, in the guise of like educational kiosks, accessible parking, possible bathrooms, but making it a high quality area for folks to park to access the mesa. Those 2 education zones that I mentioned, did our best to get them kind of within 3 miles of designated parking areas to really support, potential class sizes or family groups after church or something like that to learn more about the mesa. What is entailed in the educational kiosks, the panels that we're proposing, is undefined currently. We view there's a lot of different positive elements to celebrate that are related to the cultural and natural history and the environment of the mesa itself that could be celebrated, but currently are not defined in the plan. And then wayfinding and regulatory signage. So we're proposing to provide, quite a bit more signage and informational panels to the mesa itself, starting at the trailheads, and then moving forward into the trail system. We'll have signs at all the junctions, communicating allowed uses, communicating distances to next trails and how to get back to the trailheads, trying to avoid confusion, trying to make sure everybody's on the same page as far as like what is allowed on the mesa and, how to use the mesa in a positive manner that's not disruptive to other users or disruptive to the landscape. So in this version of the plan, after the first draft, some of the changes that are being proposed in them. On the left side of the screen, these are really down into the weeds sort of ideas. So there's not a lot of detail here. In the plan that was sent out to the stakeholder groups, there's a spreadsheet that's associated with it that asks really specific questions with attached pages and complementary maps within the plan to really kind of take a look at how we're looking at how people use the mesa, protecting resources and potential additions to the trail that look to be improvements per the comments that we received during the first round of public commenting. The zoomed out side, the right side of the screen, is something that we would like to ask a few questions to the commission about today. So on the right side of the screen, you can see long-term strategies as the first bullet. One of the things that came out of, this review of the plan itself is there's a few elements in the plan that are not quite ready to propose in a formal manner. The next slide will really detail what we're talking about when we're looking at long-term strategies, but there's a new effective chapter to this plan. After priority 1, 2, and 3 in the implementation strategy section of the report, there's now a long-term section. Adaptive bike trails. is another thing that we heard from the community about potentially incorporating into the system itself to provide, more folks the opportunity to enjoy trails in the observatory mesa itself. We also heard a large volume of comments on trails that are intended for mountain bike experience. So got a couple maps on the subsequent slides that kind of detail these areas a little bit better. We'll give a little bit more context to these ideas. And then the fourth bullet is in reference to e-bikes. We will pose a few talking points during this call, and we are not looking for solutions quite yet, but we do recognize that there's some really important elements to the adaptive trails, advanced skill levels, and e-bikes for the commission to consider. Long-term planning. So basically on this map, the elements that are in color, the conceptual trails, which are the dashed purple lines, the existing road beds that are the red lines, the existing trails that are the green lines, and the dashed orange lines that are conceptual foot trails. These are all now in that long-term planning chapter in the report. Lowell Observatory will be pursuing some strategic planning, and then after that, some subsequent campus master planning, which is really exciting for Observatory Mesa. But at this time, they're not quite sure, how the Lowell properties are going to change. And because they don't quite know how it's going to change, they're not quite ready to sign on to formally adopting some of the roads and trails that are being proposed in this plan. They do support the ideas. They just want to make sure that, what they say they're going to do, they are going to do. So at this time, in the plan, we have basically communicated, when the timing is appropriate, we will re-engage Lowell Observatory to discuss the trails, formalizing the trail system on their properties. The foot trails on the east side of Lowell properties, which is the pink polygon that's in the center of the map. These are also conceptual in nature. So we do not have a timeline for the ability to implement these foot trails to, kind of improve access on the mesa. So kind of same thing, we will be re-engaging when the timing is more appropriate. And then on the south side of the mesa, you can see these two black triangles. These are what we are now considering long-term access. Both of these locations are existing underpasses underneath the railroad. To formalize these access points and utilize these existing underpasses is going to require quite a bit more conversation with Burlington Northern Santa Fe, and also a fairly significant engineering solution for both to ensure that the public is safe and that, moving forward into time, these will be strong structures that will not need a lot of maintenance. So there's 2 access points and then 2 subsequent access trails that have been bumped down to the long-term planning because we're not quite ready to call these underpasses like official access points, and that we're really going to need to make some improvements before we do so. All right. So this slide, I titled it user experience, but this is kind of showing on the left side, we're looking at adaptive trails. So if you can see some of the dashed purple lines and some of the road beds on Lowell properties, there's this like teal colored, like cyan colored buffer. This is the current iteration of the potential plan to propose to the public on increasing the tread width. And so most of the time when folks think about single track trails, in their mind, they're really thinking about something that's about 24 inches wide, provides an intimate experience with the landscape itself, and does a fairly nice job at connecting yourself to the environment that you're in. So 24-inch trails are being proposed on the dashed purple lines that does not include that teal colored buffer. The teal colored buffer, we're looking at expanding the width to 36 inches. So adaptive cycles are hand cycles. They sit low to the ground. They typically have 3 wheels, either 2 wheels in the front or 2 wheels in the back, and they're about 32 inches in width. Hand cycles are for folks with mobility impairments who are able to pedal with their hands to be able to get out into trails, into natural areas. And so we met with the High Country Adaptive Sports Association, who has 8 adaptive cycles, and they take folks out on adaptive rides. They have group rides for adaptive cyclists, and they expressed to us that they're really not looking for something, that much wider than their tires can provide. They described it as, we think of ourselves as mountain bikers. Mountain bikers like hard trails, so do we. And so we realized that we didn't have to propose, 48-inch or 60-inch width trails to accommodate adaptive cycles, that they could be 36 inches in width, so 3-foot wide trail bed, with a few accommodations to make sure that, we don't, leave any rocks on the uphill side of the trail, as an example, that could tip a hand cycle off and down the hill below a trail. So minor accommodations, but slightly wider trail to make sure that this, this user community is included into the plan. So that's the left side of the slide. On the right side of the slide, we had a large volume of comments about providing experiences for more advanced riders, mountain bike riders. And so trail 3.36, it's highlighted in a light blue color. This is an existing user-created trail. It's known as Hot Pockets in some of the mountain biking community. And it's a popular trail for mountain bikers. It's not authorized. It was built sometime during the pandemic, not under the direction of the open space section. But it has turned into a trail that folks really love. And so we did receive a high volume comments asking to consider adopting this trail into the system to provide more of an advanced experience for riders who have that skill set. Because looking at that, the original concept, there was a trail 5.2 continued to the east side of Foots Tunnel Springs. It's now grayed out on this map, so you could get a sense of like where that original concept used to be. We're kind of creating stacked loop systems off of the Foots trail. Little short hikes that connect back to Foots, kind of providing a variety of different trail lengths. So the folks were looking at this trail, and in the comments, they proposed adopting the trail 3.36, also known as Hot Pockets, and 3.37. This is also an existing trail created in an unauthorized manner, but can potentially provide some of these loop opportunities that we had as an original intent on the south side of Observatory Mesa Natural Area. The comments did support the idea of trail point 3.37 being a multi-use trail, so not intended just for mountain bikes, but supporting that idea of multiple loop opportunities. And so, the reason that we wanted to talk to the commission today is to really kind of take a look at, the idea of changing the mentality of some of these trails, widening some of these trails beyond the typical 48 inches, providing an experience that is not currently provided on Observatory Mesa in an authorized way. So trail point 3.36, the mountain bikers do not go up that trail. They only go down it. It is intended for downhill mountain bike traffic. And so these two concepts here are something that is important for us to get the ideas from the commission about, because we're really looking at kind of changing the mentality of some of these things. We would like to hear from you all related to some of this stuff. When I think about some of these things and I think about, the open space management plan and the commission's role in kind of guiding the direction of the management plan and guiding the spirit of what open space is in the city of Flagstaff, we would like to make sure that, these ideas of widening some trails to 36 inches and also providing, intended trails that may not accommodate all non-motorized users is supported by the commission, but also want to make sure that you all are thinking about, what's appropriate for the vision of the open space itself. And so I'm going to leave this slide open so we can keep staring at these maps to kind of keep the physical places that we're talking about in context. But would like to open it up for comments or questions to the commission to see what your thoughts are as far as, these are two of the larger changes that we're potentially proposing for the public comment period, and kind of gauging your thoughts on some of these changes that we have here.
This is Jackie. I read a big part of this report, and it was fabulous. And I was involved a long time ago when FTI was trying to gather that input for a future plan for this area. I because I haven't been around for a while and I'm trying to catch up, can I just ask, like, so I think the adaptive trail idea is fabulous. I think having more technical riding available is excellent. You know, we're trying to adapt to the forest fire impacts over in Fort Valley and need to offer more places for different riding abilities to go. And I know that the bike shops in town have feelings about that too. But I just wanted to know, like, how locked in stone is this proposal once it goes to the city of Flagstaff to be voted on? Like, I'm assuming as trail building construction occurs, there are going to be hiccups in reality as well that will require that changes be made as we go forward. And I know that the Forest Service will have to go through its own NEPA process, but like, how adaptive is it once it's implemented?
You want me to address that, Mark?
Sure, go for it, Robert.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So I think we are hoping to get to the point where we actually put flagging on the ground once we get a final draft. So figuring out where those alignments are going, so they're more set before getting that approval.
So once the approval goes through, that's it.
We've always open to like adjusting the plan, and Mark, feel free to jump in here if I'm not addressing this correctly. But I think we're looking at trying to firm up the plan as we go forward. Yeah. So that when we go to city council, we have something that the alignments are fair.
Right, and that's why you're getting the public input in June, right? Because you go to the city council in the fall and hope that the public input has been made to make these modifications. Okay. Well, I just haven't gone out and ridden Hot Pockets. I think that's what you called it. I would be interested. It was like, but you know, as an individual, I support that I really support the development of the plan in response to what the community has said they want, and that's what it sounds like you've been doing. So those are my 2 cents.
Mark, did I get that correctly? We are working to firm this up pretty before we bring it to city council.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd look at this, you know, getting the implementation phases that we're proposing, Jackie, approved, so we can, you know, formalize the trail alignments on the ground truth everything, and seek funding. And so, you know, from that adaptive management standpoint, you know, I don't think that we're able to speak like, is this it for the rest of the life of Observatory Mesa? I don't think we can say that. We're looking at it more like, you know, do we have approval to implement the trails as proposed in this plan during the near term? Near term meaning years, right? To get everything funded, get all the clearances to happen, all that good stuff. So does that help you at all?
Yeah, that's excellent. I just wanted to know, like, you know, once you decide you're going to make a trail, you know, we propose that it's a 36, or you propose it's a 36-inch tread, you know, you're committed to a 36-inch tread then versus a 24. And I was just wondering like how firm that was and if there were changes. So, but I really like what you proposed. I just like that the plan is responding to public input. I think that's really, really important and will help that will provide support for it in the future.
Mark, we've got 2 line commenters. I'm not sure who is first, so let's go with Councilmember Deborah Harris.
Thank you. I just a really quick question, and I might have missed this. For the adaptive trails, what kind of are you putting any different kind of material on those trails, or what's the trail make? You know, is it just dirt that's smooth, or what?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you for that question, Councilmember. I appreciate that. So all of the dashed purple lines that you can see on the maps, these are being proposed as natural surface trails. So we wouldn't be adding any sort of surface material to it. It would be the native soil that we have on the mesa. This is, you know, intent. There's a few reasons for that. You know, one of them is it's cheaper to construct that way. It's you know, it's construction and grading of the dirt that we have there. The other one is being a little bit more connected to nature and having some of that natural aesthetic to the trails themselves, some natural rocks that are getting left into the tread surface itself, you know, that kind of thing to kind of support the desired experiences that folks are often seeking when they're hiking or mountain biking or riding horses. So yeah, so all of the proposed, whether they're single track, the 24 inches, or they're the adaptive trails at 36 would be natural surface.
Okay, so I'm just going to follow up with that. So when I think about, people in adaptive, vehicles or whatever, and sometimes people going out alone. And so how are you going to maintain that so that they're safe? Because if rocks and, larger rocks, you could tip over.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And I'd be able to get up, but someone that's in a different vehicle that may not have, full use of all their limbs, that to me seems concerning.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think so. It would start with construction standards. So we would make sure that whoever the contractor is doing the trail work or the volunteers doing the trail building would be really aware that, that finished product upon completion of construction is safe for all allowed users, which in this case would be adaptive riders, right? Things change, over time. There's sediment loss, there's sediment displacement. Some trails stay in great shape, some trails need a little love over time. And so I think, moving forward in that sort of sense, we would want to be encouraging the High Country Adaptive Sports Association and adaptive riders themselves to be communicating if anything falls below that construction standard that has been originally created. And I think we'd leave that up to the trail users themselves to make sure that the open space section knows that there are issues that need to be addressed.
Okay, so then, and I'm making an assumption here that all of this is going to be ran past legal, because my concern is that if we advertise that we have adaptive trails, and if someone takes our advertisement at face value and they go out on the trail and there's an issue that we haven't corrected, I wonder if there's any liability for us. I don't know. So I'm just putting that out there, and I'm sure Sterling and whoever else is going to look at this is going to take all of that into consideration.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's a really good point and something we need to be mindful of. For the Forest Service land, as an example, it's kind of a use at your own risk sort of situation. And we'd want to make sure that idea would translate to the entire system itself. Yeah, but it's a really good
Well, I think we better make sure that that's either part of our plan or posted, and not just assume that people will know that it's used at your own risk. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. We appreciate that for sure.
It looks like Councilmember Mary Norton has come.
Yeah, thanks. Let me pull up my notes here. Good to see you again, Mark. Questions about, well, first of all, I wanted to say, when I first got on the commission about a year ago, this was just coming up and going to public comment and then kind of got tabled. So it's good to see it again. And I did go through all of the report, and I appreciate that you taking into account some of the comments that were about the wildlife corridors and the elk calving areas, and that you actually made a little tweaks there to accommodate that. But I still got the feeling a little bit that this was obviously heavily mountain bike focused. And I just, from my personal aspect and the way that I have used the Mesa before is, primarily for hiking, walking, dog walking. Sometimes, one year I did the summer series runs and, ran up there. But I wouldn't consider myself necessarily a regular user or a familiar user of the Mesa, like all of you that have put this amount of detailed, knowledgeable work into this plan, which is really amazing. But I just wanted to kind of express like the things that have inhibited me from using the Mesa have been, those access points and having to drive and worry about parking when I got there. When I may have other areas that are just easier for me to get to. Also that hesitation of once getting up there, if I'm alone am I going to get lost or turned around? So the signage, as far as like wayfinding and knowing which trails I should be taking as a hiker or a dog walker, would be important to me. And especially as we, some of those trails are specifically for, a higher level mountain bike rider or a downhill mountain bike rider, or the adaptive trails, how I would hope that there would be signage so that, a hiker or a walker would know, like, I'm not going to go on that trail. I'm going to stick to this one that's more pedestrian friendly. And it, particularly with the speed of mountain bikers. And then, of course, we get to the subject of the e-bikes. And
Yeah.
I support the idea of having e-bikes allowed, because it gives accessibility to so many more people. But I would just want either there to be maybe dedicated trails, or certainly really well signed trails, so that, I don't think I really want to find myself, on a trail with my dog and maybe my headphones in and not realizing that it's a trail for e-bikes. So I think signage is something that I was really zoning in on, and hoping that, there would be a lot of signage. And then I was just curious about, as these trails get installed or the other ones get decommissioned, how do like third-party apps like All Trails and Gia and similar apps like that get updated? And is it different than just a regular user, submitting a change in trail? How does that happen?
That is an odd question. The app that I'm most familiar with, the trail app, it's called Trailforks. Trailforks has, every area has administrators that have more control over like the user submission of trail locations, and they're allowed to add trails and delete trails as appropriate for the land ownership and the land management. I am actually not aware of how All Trails or Gaia, what that process looks like. So I think that's going to be something that we'll want to look into a little bit to make sure that the information is accurate.
Yeah, because that would be something that I would refer to, or that we have referred to when we're up there and we're not really quite sure if we're on an
Right, sure.
established trail, or if it's one of those, offshoot trails that just got made, where I'm going to get turned around and lost on. So just want to throw that out there. And then once this is adopted by council, who does the work? Is that a subcontractor, volunteers? And is there a budget set aside for this implementation and costs for those subs and signage?
Well, I think we're going to sign you up for trail days. No, so there is no, because we don't have approval for this plan, we're really not in a position to seek funding. Often grants are really looking for shovel-ready projects. Shovel-ready means that all the approvals have been had, all of the, archaeological clearances, wildlife habitat clearances have already taken place. And we're not there yet. So we don't even have approval of the plan itself to go do those clearances. And so
that makes sense.
Funding is undefined for sure. I mean, there's options and opportunities. There's a volunteer base here that we could try to engage to get some work done during volunteer events. We have a lot of options, but currently we don't have anything concrete.
Okay. Could you revisit the idea of an abundance of signage for, the people that aren't on a bike, so that they don't get stuck in some place they maybe shouldn't be? Is that has that been discussed in more detail?
In my opinion, there's not enough detail in the plan on that. So imagine Trailhead with a kiosk with a map. This Trailhead kiosk includes, user experience messaging about being respectful to other users, about maintaining speeds, not being jerks to each other, cleaning up after your dog, keeping your dog off leash. So like regulation and stewardship stuff. Also imagine some educational signage about like why Observatory Mesa is so special. As you get farther away from the trailhead, the signage is really going to change to, single post trails at every single junction. So we envision these posts having allowed uses. So like you can like imagine those stickers you see on Forest Service trails that's show hikers and equestrians and mountain bikers. These are your allowed uses, to make sure that everybody's aware that, you know, you are welcome on this trail or you are not welcome on this trail, depending on how you're using it. Also, there will be at these junction signs, there will be distances to the next trail and the next named trail. And if we can get a large enough panel, the distance back to the trailhead. So we could kind of show like where you're at. If you turn this way, you will connect back to this trail. If you continue on down the path, it will be, you know, X amount of distance back to the trailhead where you park your car. So hopefully, and that would be like the regulatory / wayfinding element, trying to keep it simple, not obtrusive, so it doesn't detract from the experience once you get out onto the mesa itself, but making sure that enough information is provided to keep people safe.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It looks like Chair Wilson has a comment.
Yeah, just a quick comment to follow up on both Commissioner Thomas and Norton. They spoke probably much more eloquently than I could on what I am a little concerned, not really concerned about, but want to make sure that is addressed. And kind of, I do support the, you know, the idea of the adaptive trails, well, providing for mountain biking and also the e-bikes within reason. Early on, you mentioned about, you know, a hiker's solitude. I'm just a little concerned that when we get involved, you know, with the mountain bikes and the regular bikes and e-bikes and the adaptive trail and I think even equestrian is part of this at some point. I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight or of just the person that likes to go out and hike the trails and not have to worry about, you know, somebody flying down a trail or even, you know, noise of any, you know, you're looking for solitude. So that's all I wanted to say. You know, it's kind of just following on what both commissioners mentioned earlier, and I'm also a little bit concerned about those items as well.
Great, thanks for that, Commissioner. I mean, right now, in this iteration of the draft, we're looking at a multi-use trail system. So we would be allowing uses to the best of our ability for like all of the trails. And so, you know, hikers and mountain bikers would be sharing the same trail, just like they do, you know, on the Forest Service around Flagstaff. There is other management tactics where you're separating uses. You know, so there are hiker specific trails, mountain bike specific trails. There's also other adaptive strategies that you can take where, you know, certain users are allowed for certain days of the week and other users are allowed for other days of the week. These are all kind of options that folks have applied in other parts of the country in the past to you know, kind of help with creating those experiences. But that's, you know, that's feedback that we would love to be able to understand better for sure in some kind of comment platform, whether it comes from you all as a commission or in the public commenting as an individual. Because currently, you know, this is proposed as a multi-use system. So everybody's sharing the same trail at the same time. So
yeah, and for me, that would be a concern that every trail is usable by everybody.
Right.
And I see some conflict there. So it's just a concern.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Commissioner Wilson.
Actually, we've got one more comment from Commissioner Nat White. He wrote in a comment to me because he could not make the meeting today. So he says the following: I support the latest trail plan because it balances the primary preservation requirement with non-motorized access to all, not just bikers. One exception with an alternative is the current user-built downhill scramble sandwiched between Tunnel Springs and the observatory property is counter to the preservation requirements characterized by the dense oak complex contours and the nearby spring. The alternative could be, with more flexibility in design, would be a location west of Tunnel Springs where the growth is more open and more of the usual monotony. And I think his comment is in reference to the 3.36 and 3.37 that Mark was speaking to earlier.
Yep, that's correct. He's referring to trail 3.36.
I have one other. Do we have any other questions for the commission or
I have some quick question.
yeah.
What percentage of the improvements are reserved for the academic trails, like overall? And then have you done any projections on how this use will increase and what demand you have for use of adaptive trails? So that High Country Adaptive Association, I can't recall the exact name of it. Do they have an idea of like what the demand for those sorts of trails are?
We are not aware of a large adaptive community in Flagstaff, but the High Country Adaptive Sports Association does take out on a regular basis, it's kind of monthly during the summer months, group rides. They own 8 adaptive cycles, and then they welcome other adaptive riders on their groups as well. So if they had, you know, a group ride planned on Observatory Mesa, you could expect a group of maybe 8 to 12 adaptive cycles at once. We don't have a good handle on like the general use, like how often adaptive cycles would be on the trails. Sorry, that's not more helpful, but that's what we got right now.
Thank you.
Mark, can you go to the slide about the 3 things that we're kind of looking for feedback on? Look at the next slide.
This one?
There you go. Yeah, thank you. So, oh, I see Commissioner North.
Oh, I just had a quick question as far as these comments that were, or this discussion. Does this count as sort of our public comment from the Open Spaces Commission to you, to the group, or do we need to put something more formal, you know, as far as a letter to you all, or do we need to visit with the public, you know, outreach meetings to express our same concerns there? How does this input work?
I would say, oh,
Go ahead.
I would say both. If the commission would like to provide a response to this draft in the plan as a body, we would like to request a letter stating as such, like what your position is, what you like and don't like in a little bit more of a formal manner. And then it can come in an email to Robert or myself. If you do not prefer to provide a comment as a body, we are actively taking notes right now. All of the comments so far have been tracked. Quite honestly, we'll be reviewing these comments in this part of the process. This is all really meaningful feedback to us, and it's really important for us to understand. But we also really encourage you to comment as individuals during the public process.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, we could have this on another agenda item in June if you wanted to touch base again about making a formal comment as a group. If that's something that the commission wants. I also just thought I would mention too that that public meeting is on June 14th here at the Aquaplex from 5 to 7 for those that want to attend. If you are attending as a commission or just attending in general, If we have more than 3 folks attending, we do need to announce the forum notice. So let me know if you plan to attend that. And, I think that these particular topics are some of the topics that we expect a lot of discussion out of from the public. We've been getting a lot of emails, both pro and con for e-bikes. I do think that that's going to be a discussion for the public. Just for clarity, our management plan we have does have language that says we do not allow motorized activity on our property. So at some point, I think that is a topic that we're going to need more clarity on, and that we will be back in front of the commission here to talk about whether or not how we want to interpret that and what we want to clarify in that plan to support this plan.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
What is the enforcement? Like, if it was allowed, if e-bikes were not allowed, how is that enforced?
I think it would be pretty challenging, but we would be working with our police department.
Okay.
Commissioner Norton, I see your hand is still, I don't know if your hand's up from before. Do you have a?
Sorry, I didn't have another question. I'll take it down.
I don't know if we want to call for a public comment period. I guess we have a few members of the public. Okay, yeah, that's anything else.
Okay, Flagstaff Fire Department?
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think we have time.
Yes.
Commissioner Norton, you still have to leave at 5. I think, right? So maybe we should wrap things up. You want to move down to reports and updates with Councilmember Harris.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Can I confirm that Mary still needs?
I'm still here. I can probably maybe stay a few minutes over, but that's about it. I need to pop into another meeting. Sorry.
Yeah, let's do the updates.
Great. Councilmember Harris, do you have any updates for the commission?
Not really any at this point that I think would be helpful to this group right now. It's a lot going on, but nothing that I think you need to know right this minute that you probably already don't know. Unless there's some specific questions.
Don't see any. How about the Planning and Zoning Commission representative?
And I don't really have anything much today either. We've had 2 very short meetings. Our meeting this week is canceled, and it really hasn't been anything applicable to this commission. We just had a conditional use permit and a abandonment of a right of way. So nothing that really applies to open spaces. Thanks.
Thank you. And Robert and Sylvia for open space management.
We'll just take questions if you have any questions.
We do have a lot of upcoming events, and I'm drafting an email to include all of you for those events.
Any questions?
Okay. This informational items to and from commissioners and staff. Council update on October 31st, 2023.
Yes, so there is the option of the Open Spaces Commission making an update to City Council in person. There's an opening on October 31st of 2023. If the Open Spaces Commission is interested in doing that, that's something they can consider and put a presentation together that I can help with, and then Chair or Vice Chair can deliver that if interested. So that's just an item for consideration. We can put that next to agenda item.
Yeah, that sounds like a good future agenda item to discuss. And then there's a follow-up from the community development representative that was here 2 meetings ago.
So I put on our notes after our conversation, Commissioner Eplin, about, we talked about how do we know things that have been mentioned to the commission before, how do we know if they've been followed on? So I made kind of a short list here of items that I think that we talked about as a group that we can use for checking in on during this to and from space. And the item that you're specifically asking about the GIS support for the development applications, we have not talked to community development in addition to what they, in addition to having them here. So I can certainly shoot them an email and remind them that that was something that was brought up in conversation. I think an item such as that, when we have those types of discussions in the future, we might want to weigh in as a group and kind of see if that's something that all the commission wants to support. And then, and I think something like that could be helpful for the entire community. So I'm happy to follow up, but we also want to just think about like what our purview is as well. So like whether or not it's something that the commission should be making a recommendation on time. So, but I did put a short list together, and I'll just very quickly go through these. So the master plan, which is in progress, I think is a commission recommendation. The open space city code amendments is a recommendation from the commission as well, which is on hold at the moment, but we will have that back in front of the commission at some point. Community development asked about interested person lists and what commissioners wanted to have their names added to that. If you're interested in that, or if you want me to put that on a future agenda, I'm certainly happy to get your names added to that. The community development GIS representation with projects. Getting the open space commission visionary map system to community development. That's also for follow-up. The recommendation for Schultz Creek Trail connection with the Forest Service, that's in progress. And then the development review protocol, which needs to come back to the commission. So. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I mean, the question that I was just interested in, when people come here and give presentations and then ask us for feedback or something, and we mention something, how do we get like feedback on that? Seems to just go out there but not come back. So don't want to create work for anybody either. So if we shouldn't be doing that stuff, that help guide us, like if that's within our purview or not.
Yep.
Like it has to create work for them. That's not really our job.
Yeah, that sounds good. And so I'll just have that general list in the notes that I supplied to the commission, and then we can use that. Hopefully, we'll try to reserve a little bit more time for the to and from, so we can kind of check in on those and give you kind of a report where they are.
Thank you. Potential future agenda items is next.
Yeah, we have a couple items from this meeting that will move to the next agenda. And then we do have a request from community development to talk about open space zoning code terms. This is probably an important topic that you might want to think about before our next meeting. There's a lot of terms in our city code that talk about open space that does not mean open space that's open to the public for recreation. And so they're going to come looking for some recommendations about what they could do to bring some clarity to that. That will be on next month as well. And so because of that, I propose that we move the Schultz Creek Trailhead field member to July.
Anything on the multi-year project planning? Those other two things.
This was something that we talked about, I think, as a commission to have a future agenda. To have something like similar conversation as to what the Parks and Rec Commission has, to talk a little bit about, to make sure that we're aligned with your priorities as well. So this could, if we can squeeze this in next month, we could, or maybe that is something that is all the way out in August.
Okay. the last thing is the Don Weaver Trail alignment.
Those are coming up too. Yeah.
Okay,
We'll keep them on there still.
pretty cool. I think that's the end of our scheduled agenda. Is there anything else that we need to?
Not for me.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second?
I can second. This is Mary Norton.
All right, we're officially adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good night.